Hey everyone, before we get into this next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, I want to give a quick shout out to a couple of the sponsors of the podcast, the first of which is the Archives of Falconry. And for those of you that have actually never made it to Boise, did you know that you can still see the Archives collection by going to their website at falconry.org? And from there, you can click on the collection tab and explore thousands of collection items using keywords or advanced searches. And in case there's other items that you have that you no longer want but would like to be preserved, you can also donate to the archives by contacting them at info@falconry.org and getting in touch with them. And for more information in general, as always, you can just head to falconry.org and find out more information from there. I'd also like to give Seth Roy a shout out also for being a continued sponsor of the podcast. And if you're in the market for a new hunting partner for next upcoming season, breeding season is just around the corner. So if you'd like to have a new parent-reared North American Finnish or Russian Goshawk as a hunting partner for next season, hit Seth up. He produces a lot of really nice game hawks. Hit him up at northmountaingoshawks.com or on Facebook at North Mountain Goshawks. You can also email him at ostringer3@gmail.com and tell him Falconry Chronicles sent you. Now, on to the next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast.
Finally, I get a little bit closer and closer, and I figure, well, I may as well flush because I don't know what else to do. And I have to go back to get my old telemetry out and figure out what happened to my bird. So the partridge get up and go, and I'm watching them fly. They're climbing pretty high, which is usually a sign that they're not very intimidated. So they're off the ground a bit, 15, 20 feet. And all of a sudden I hear this slight noise, the wind.
And here we are again for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast. Thanks again so much for continuing to join me on these journeys. And this particular episode takes us back up north to Canada, where Martin Geleynse joins me. I was finally able to connect with Martin after not being able to at the past NAFA meet. He's kind of a busy guy at those kind of functions, being the current NAFA president and all, but got a chance to finally connect with him remotely here and talk about all kinds of cool stuff and, what it's been like for him to be NAFA president and, kind of navigating a lot of the stuff involved with getting falconry legalized where he's at in Canada and different things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and, as always here, turn things over to this conversation with Martin and hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Yeah, the NAFA meet was pretty cool. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I wish I could have stayed for more than a couple days or so. But, unfortunately, a bunch of people ended up with the crud there. But it's what happens sometimes,
Oh yeah, I know. It was a great meet. For me, it was incredibly intensely busy. With the IAF there was just all the stuff that goes on at a NAFA meet, plus all of that. Plus we did this the workshops for Latin American falconry. It was just there was mostly at an NAFA meet, you go hawking, do this, you have an evening program a little bit, you hang around. This one was all day, every day, all night. I was exhausted at the end of it.
Well, and it doesn't help the immune system whenever you're burning the candle at both ends. And
absolutely.
Whenever you're like running on fumes the whole time and you really don't have much of a choice, unfortunately. But I do want to ask you, as far as like the IAF aspect of things and the involvement with all of that, I know that significantly increases the itinerary and everything. But do you feel like that you were able, and like the whole committee and the board and everybody was able to kind of accomplish what you set out to achieve, with the goals of that meet?
I think we did that and then some.
Awesome.
I can't, in the sense that, so with the IAF, the regular course of events that would have been, one day is the IAF annual general meeting where all the delegates and they go through their whole thing. So that's sort of in addition. Then the next day we did the board meeting, which we typically do at NAFA meet. We have the board meeting in the morning, and we have a bit of orientation. We do, and then we have the public version of that, the public meeting in the evening. So right away we have one whole day of extra meetings. Then because the IAF and the NAFA boards and officers and stuff were together all in the same spot, which doesn't happen very often, once every 6 or 7 years, whenever they come here, which is not very often. So we adjusted the board meeting schedule on Tuesday, and we had about an hour and a half. I want to say an hour and a half followed up by lunch. So, all together, it was probably 2.5, 3 hours of time to spend where we got together with the IF. So the whole NAFA board and all the officers got together with the advisory board of the IAF. And we went through, kind of a roundtable discussion, and then a bunch of side discussions on all of the issues that they're facing and what, and what they're working on, and then sort of what we're working on. Plus it was a get to know you kind of session. So that was again, another extra thing that we don't normally do, but it was really very, very good, very fruitful. Then we had 2 days, well, not the entire day, but 2 solid half days plus a bit. It was almost a day and a half at the end of a sequence of meetings and sessions having to do with Latin American falconry. So there were a lot of delegates there that were at the meet, and also we had about 25 people online from Latin American countries participating in sort of a walkthrough of where various countries are at, next steps, how, what information is lacking. Brian Millsap participated in that on one of the days and was able to present some information on, raptor ecology and how the impact of falconry take on wild raptors, and based on all the research that he put together and the papers he's written over the years. So that was for a lot of the government officials that were on the Zoom meeting, which we had government officials from about 5 or 6 countries listening to that. That was we scored on that one, I think, in terms of boosting the credibility of falconry as a field activity in those countries where it is mostly unregulated or just starting to be regulated. And we increased the credibility of NAFA, the IAF, the falconers who are working on this stuff. It just, it was a really, I think we hit it out of the park on that one, I would say.
Well, good deal. It's nice to talk to people from other countries and really get an idea of what they have to go through with their growing pains and the growth process, and talking to some of these countries that are still kind of in the infancy of forming their rules, regulations, and all that kind of stuff to get falconry, legitimized and all that. And I mean, just for transparency's sake, I mean, that's one of the things that I wanted to really kind of hit on with you today in this conversation was, there's a lot of people that are, sometimes skeptical and sometimes just, I think, just don't overall understand the process of what goes into all of these different things. And, I think that if people really understood how much time, effort, energy, and work went into the collaborative process and getting all these things implemented and stuff, I think they would be a little bit more prone to, support a lot of these organizations like NAFA and, even their state clubs and things that, it's a lot of work. And I think that, I know for me, I think that if there was able to be a little bit more transparency in some ways, to kind of see, how much work goes into it with a lot of people, it would, like I say, it would at least raise awareness or at least appreciation, for the job that it is. It's a huge job. It's a huge undertaking.
Well, it is, John. And and people very often don't realize a few important things about the job. It's not, it is a process. It's a job that never ends, right? Even when you think we have the perfect regulations, we're done. They're perfect. There's nothing they don't stay the same. The legal environment on which those regulations rest isn't going to stay the same. The politicians that supported them, or the bureaucrats, the regulators, whatever, they're not going to stay the same. And so all of a sudden, everything was perfect until it isn't. and then you have it's an issue to deal with. So there's that. Laws change. We saw that in 2021 when the USDA said, "Hey, we're going to create all these regulations for care of keeping birds in captivity." Well, it turns out at the end of the day, we managed to get them to leave falconry alone because of the way the act was written. But one word different, and we'd had a big set of issues to deal with, and likewise, there's constantly, the reality is the regulations aren't perfect, and so we constantly have to work on them. So then you magnify that by there's 50 states, 10 provinces. I don't know how many towns and municipalities in every one of those states and provinces. It is a job that's never done, and it can't. And NAFA, no one organization can do it all. We need to have an effective falconry community that's really hooked together, communicates well, works at their different levels. And people definitely lose sight of that. I think that there's an older generation of falconers that sort of grew up in an era where falconry was in many states not legal. And they have a keen appreciation for what it took to get it legal and why it's important to keep it legal. And I don't mean this is not disparaging, but if you grew up in a situation where it's always been legal and you've never known any different, and every state around you is all legal, then it seems like, well, that's just it's not threatened, and there's nothing to work on. It's always been that way. It's always going to be that way, and unfortunately, I am seeing, in my position, some erosion of that. States where falconry, and provinces, actually one of my favorite provinces, where there's been some retraction, a new set of civil servants or regulators didn't get all the communication from the falconry community that their predecessors did. And they start thinking, well, why do we have this regulation? Let's change this. Let's add this restriction. So it's very important for all falconers to take that step seriously. Make sure your state club is viable, support NAFA. Those are things that you have to keep it up, because when we have a problem, it's too late to build the organization that you need to solve it. You have to have it there.
Sure.
Just to be fun.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I mean, whether or not you're pro like entities or government or this, that, or the other, or whatever your stance is on a lot of different things, I mean, you do have to have a majority voice. I mean, it's just reality. And and if you don't have that, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot one way or the other. I mean, that being said, there's just so many people that I think that don't realize just how many different wheels in the cogs or cogs in the wheel, so to speak, or however you want to, whatever saying.
It is a complicated process. Yeah. It is a complicated process. It has to take place at multiple levels. There's in the U.S. there's federal regulations, then there's state regulations that have to mirror those. So you're operating at multiple levels. The process to get state regulations enacted can be in some states very complicated. Some states a little easier. In Canada there isn't federal regulations too many. There's not too many federal regulations, but every province has a different set of regulations and a different process for modifying them, and so it gets kind of involved and technical. I mean, you have to understand how the process works, and it doesn't matter who's in government at the time. It doesn't matter what political parties. Generally speaking, falconry has been not too partisan. We're not heavily affected. In general, I think wildlife management has stayed out of the partisan fray a little bit. So you tend to get, but it's a machine to get these things done. You have to make proposals. They have to go to public comment. They have to, there's rules around the comment period and the consultation process and all the rest of that stuff. And you have to know those things. Otherwise, you won't get there. And people need to understand about falconry. You're in it, of course, and you've been doing it forever. All of the things that we do seem perfectly normal and perfectly reasonable, and who could possibly have anything against them? But if you look at falconry from the point of view of any other wildlife related activity, and I don't care if it's hunting or bird watching or camping or anything that uses natural resources. Falconers, for a small group, we have hit way above our weight class. We have gained for ourselves a set of regulations and rules and privileges, frankly, abilities to use natural resources in a way that no other group can. Like, you just name me one other group that can go climb a nest, take an animal out of the wild, and bring it home. Like, nobody can do that. Most people, they can't even keep wildlife in captivity, regardless of where it came from. Not only can we keep wildlife in captivity, we can go and take it from the wild. Then, things like an extended hunting season and all the rest of these things, if you think about all of that and the regulatory process that went along with it, captive breeding and selling of things that are wild by nature, if not themselves wild animals, that is quite a stack of legislative successes that almost no other group has managed to accomplish. And maybe they haven't even tried. But so that's what it takes to sustain falconry. That's a lot of complicated legislation. And it wasn't easily, it's not like somebody just knocked on Congress's door and said, hey, we'd like a few regulations, you mind? And they said, sure. That's not how it went. So there's a lot there. And I think that we need to be thankful for and protective of the regulations we do have, because we have a lot of privileges that other wildlife users couldn't touch.
For sure. And, I think that, like I said, I at least I'm confident that if more people saw, just like I said, the extent of which the people have to collectively go to maintain, and, the amount that people have to sacrifice from their own hunting seasons to do different things.
Yep.
And their own falconry, their own personal life for the benefit. There is some degree of selfishness involved, because, of course, if somebody doesn't do it, you can't do it either. You know what I mean? But But at the same time, do you personally think, though? And for those that are listening and don't and really aren't aware of your position and stuff, you've been NAFA president now for how many years?
This is coming up to the end of my second year.
So you personally, just your personal opinion and your tenure so far as NAFA president, are there other aspects of how the organization kind of runs, operates, or whatever that you think could be better about being a little bit more like transparent, or at least, just kind of making people aware of all of the different things that they might not know about that go on behind the scenes, just so people can be more aware of all that work?
So we try and communicate.
Sure.
And it's a bit of a balancing act. So there is people would be amazed to know how much is going on.
Sure.
Every board meeting, I give a little update of, okay, what happened in the last 2 months? And usually I have to go quickly look at my emails and, what have we been working on? And honestly, in any 2-month period, it could be, 2 different municipalities. We wrote a letter in support of, changing their bylaws so you can keep raptors. There was some proposal of regulations in one state or another that we had to deal with. There was, Puerto Rico is trying to get falconry regulated. So there's a bunch of, things going on there. We're working on, there's a couple of issues, irons that we have in the fire right now, relative to peregrine normalization, updating regs in a few areas, the vaccine, HPAI. So there's just, a flurry of activity associated with that. Then there's all what I'd call keeping the lights on. There's the Hawk Chalk has to get out. The journal has to get out. There's, money coming in and going out. Membership databases have to be updated, all kinds of things. So I try and communicate, and I know others do too. If you over communicate, right, if I start blasting out emails every week to the members,
sure,
more and more of them hit unsubscribe, right? and they do that. It's like, all right, so you have to be careful, and there's a limit to how much you can communicate and actually get people to absorb. So there is an awful lot of I would say, I try and go once a month, and I'm often more than once a month in reality, to communicate to the members through emails, which is one of the better ways to communicate complicated information. There's only so much you can do on Facebook, for example. and Hawk Chalk, comes out much delayed. It's not real-time communication by any stretch. So back to my point, you have to kind of condense your message. And so there's an awful lot of I'd say the mechanics of what goes on behind NAFA that it's really hard to get it, to get it out there. I think if the people who come around to field meets can see some of that in action, come to the board meetings. We do publish the agenda on our website, on the NAFA's website. The agenda and minutes of every board meeting are there for people who are interested. It's usually, 1 or 2 pages each. The agenda is usually a page, and the minutes are maybe 2 or 3 pages of what was discussed. But that only tells half the story. That's the board meetings. There are a lot of volunteers that make NAFA work. A lot. From there's treasurer and assistant treasurer, membership secretary, assistant membership secretary, general counsel. There's a legal team, 3 lawyers. There's a publications committee, and of course Dan Milner. I mean, if I listed them all out, I'm sure there's 20 people there. That
sure, yeah.
Medical team and all the rest of it. There's a lot. It takes a lot to keep falconry going, and to be able to respond to the issues that happen, and they do happen,
Yeah, for sure. And just to clarify, I mean, I'm not implying that there isn't an effort made or there isn't any transparency at all or anything. But that being said, I mean, it is like I said, there's all kinds of other things that I know that it would be almost impossible to be able to consistently touch on just because of all the different things that are constantly in the works. But I'm just curious from your perspective. I mean, like I said, it pretty much answers my question, though. I mean,
yeah. It's a little bit like watching a sausage get made, right?
Yeah,
It's not always pretty.
Yeah. No, I'm sure, but I mean, well, I'm glad that it sounds like you pretty much were very optimistic and very pleased with the turnout and the results from the meet and everything. I mean, I'm glad to hear that.
I think it was a great meet, and and they're all great meets. I decided when I became Canadian director back in 2013, and I went to 2 or 3 meets. By the time I got to my third one, it was before I was vice president or anything like that. I thought to myself, I'm never going to miss another one of these. Like I'm just not. And I'll say this to all of the people who are listening who have not been to an NAFA meet or have only occasionally been to an NAFA meet. It gets more fun the more you go, because the more you get to know people from all over the place. Not just the United States, but United States, Canada, Australia, the UK. People come from every NAFA meet has a pretty decent international contingent, and there's the regulars. You just get to meet such a great bunch of knowledgeable people that once you've got some familiarity there, you just don't want to miss another one. You don't want to miss it.
Yeah, I mean, it's I wish that logistically, with the way my life works, and especially with a lot of them being on Thanksgiving week and stuff, I wish that I could make more personally. And in some ways, just like I said, for me and the type of career that I'm currently in, it's hard to consistently make those things, but
it is.
Everybody's situations are different. But all that being said, I mean, I want to kind of start talking a little bit about how your falconry's been going recently. I know at the NAFA meet you mentioned to me that your season was going to be pretty much done. I mean, just because of your schedule, your roles that you serve, personal stuff. I mean, do you kind of always have an abbreviated season, or?
Well, I didn't not always have an abbreviated season. The falconry season here, where I live in Ontario, is 7 months. Actually, runs from September 1st till March 31st. Mm-hmm. So it's a great, nice, long season. Mm-hmm. We used to have a decent number of Hungarian partridge, just not too far south of my house, and that this is a northern climate, right? So everything. Like I drove out to pick up some quail today. Every pond is frozen, right? And it's been mostly frozen for 2 weeks probably, on and off. Like once it gets a skin of ice on it, it doesn't matter if it thaws out. There's no ducks anymore, right? And so our duck season really starts to get iffy after December 1st. Some years you can stretch it, but it's iffy. So duck season's kind of short. Regardless of what the legal dates are, it's for falconry, it's short.
Yeah.
So you need that upland game. Now we used to have decent numbers of, I could keep it, I could run it right through to, into February. And that was a great long season. And I got some fantastic hawking, on coveys of partridge. But because of, changes in agriculture and the intensification of pesticide usage, probably mostly, there are no partridge left here. I could drive 7 hours and in 3 days, I might be able to get a flight, out in Eastern Ontario or two. I've did that a few times in years, in recent years, and have just quit because it's hard to keep your bird going. So there's that. I could have a few weeks of hunting ducks left, but with HPAI and the fact that, I've been hawking the last 3 or 4 years, I've been going out to Saskatchewan hawking for 2 months, 2.5, almost 3 in one case, but this year was more like a little short of 2 months. And then it's all upland birds, right? So sharp-tailed grouse, Hungarian partridge. I've got a hybrid right now. He's doing fantastic. He's in second year. And, with his pitch and the way he flies, trying to fly him here in the much more closed country with wires and highways and buildings, and there just isn't the space for him to fly the way he would fly, even if there was quarry other than ducks, which there isn't. So I kind of, rather than trying to, stretch it out into something completely unreasonable, kind of ruin my bird or risk it, I just said, I went to Saskatchewan, brought my bird to Nebraska, hawked chickens for almost 2 weeks, week and a half. And that was it. Saturday morning after the meet, I had a flight on chickens, and that was it. Called the bird down and said, okay, that's my season. Now, hopefully next year I'll be retired. And we'll keep it. We'll stretch it out to Christmas. Maybe we'll go back in January. Who knows?
Fair enough.
Because I got to tell you, I'm coming down. I had the best season. This past season was probably my best season in probably 25 years of hawking. And it was not until I had a really good female peregrine back in the 90s on Hungarian partridge. We just had a blast. But it's probably been that long since I had a season as good as this one. So I've been sort of coming down. I've been going through withdrawals last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's rough. I mean, especially whenever you wear so many hats and do so many different things. I mean, I can relate, to that to a large extent, just because of all the things I'm involved in and stuff too. And this season, my season's pretty much already done now too. I mean, I was flying a friend's Harris for her, and I mean, it's just gotten to the point now where it's like, okay, I mean, I got all this stuff going on. I'm trying to, make all these changes with the podcast and so on and so forth, trying to make some other changes. And it's just like, well, juice versus squeeze. It's always juice and squeeze,
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, when I was young, I was always stealing time for falconry from one thing or another. I would steal it from work. I'd steal it from my family. I'd steal it where, you squeeze it in no matter what. Mm-hmm. I can't do that anymore. I don't want to do that. In the first place, I don't want to make the compromises. I don't mind. Well, stealing time from work is one thing, but stealing time from families,
yeah,
that's, I'd rather enjoy my falconry and just have, not have to steal anything and just have it, much more integrated and rational. And I can do that. My season started in September. I started, got the bird out on the drone for a bit, and I was in Saskatchewan by late September. And, we headed off to the NAFA meet mid-November. I got back on the 27th or 8th of November, and okay, it's a bit of a short season, but we'll stretch it. We'll get it going more like 3.5 months next year, and that'll be good.
Well, I envy you. It's going to be a long time, if ever, before I'll probably be long dead before I even get a chance to even contemplate retirement. But I don't know. It's always a juggling act for sure, man. It is a constant compromise. You do one thing, something else suffers somewhere, regardless no matter what you use. It's just all about choices and stuff. But that being said, I mean, that would be a good time, I guess, just to talk some about. Your kind of progression through falconry over the years. I mean, how did you get into it? I mean, how did you get started?
Well, I had, so when I was like 9 years old, I saw Disney Wild World, Disney, I don't know, whatever they called Disney shows back then. Sunday night, every Sunday night, family would watch Disney and together. And there was a show there, and I don't actually remember the specific title. There were two. Disney did two things that had a bit of a falconry theme, and then one of them was Rusty and the Falcon. I think that's the one that it was. I saw that, and 9-year-old boy. So my eyes lit up when I saw him fly this falcon, and I think I said out loud to my parents, "I'm going to do that. That's when I grow up. I'm going to do that." And it's sort of, I'd read every falconry book. I took them out of the library. We had a pretty good collection in the local library. I read all of them. They were all old British books mostly, but I read them all. I knew all about falconry. But then it sort of faded away. As I was a teenager, it sort of was laying there dormant. When I was about 21 or so, I was in university. I was halfway through university. And I had an opportunity to work on a peregrine hack that was in the middle of Algonquin Provincial Park, so a kind of a wilderness hack. Algonquin Provincial Park is it's about 3,000 square miles of hilly forested wilderness in the Canadian Shield. So it's a lot of lakes and cliffs and lakes and things. And this was one of the early releases of peregrines in Ontario, and they did it at this two wilderness sites in the middle of the park. And I got a job doing that, and so we just loafed around on a campsite watching peregrines and feeding peregrines. And I got to the end of the summer, and we'd watched 6 or 12 of them flying around. And I thought, wow, I reawakened my desire for falconry. And so that I came out of the bush, got back, went to a Raptor Research Foundation meeting, which happened to be at McGill University in Montreal. That year, met some falconers, started to make some contacts, and that's where I got my start. So this was all in Ontario. It was all pre-regulation. We had no regulations, but there was a fairly active falconry community. So that sort of got me started. And then shortly thereafter, Operation Falcon kind of came down on us, like a ton of bricks. I lived maybe 10 miles from the Canadian epicenter of Operation Falcon. So that, that was I got a front row seat on all of the goings on, of which there were plenty. And then the Ontario government tried to outlaw falconry twice. They introduced legislation into the House of Commons twice to outlaw falconry. So the falconry community, there was no organization at the time. And so we created one, actually sitting in a cafe in Lamar, Colorado. It turned out in 1984, there was about 4 or 5 Ontario falconers that happened to go to the NAFA meet. That was my first NAFA meet in 1984, Lamar, Colorado. And we were talking about what was happening and what we were going to do about it. And we actually formed the basis of the Ontario Hawking Club around the table in a cafe in Lamar, Colorado. Came back, got the club going, met with a bunch of falconers, sort of took on the government, managed to get them to stop the first time. 2 years later, they tried again. We got that kind of settled. It wasn't really so much the Ontario Hawking Club as the fact that they got sued by a much larger organization. And then that bought us some time. And then we spent 15 years of working. We had a full set of regulations that we had developed with them that we were trying to promote based on, regulations that were being adopted all over the place. NAFA's guidelines, all of this stuff. I was on the phone with Kent Carney, every other week at that time. But it took from then, 1987 was the last that they were trying to reinterpret the law in a way that would make falconry more or less illegal when they gave up changing it. And that went to the Supreme Court of Ontario and was thrown out. And that from 1987 till 1997, that bought us 10 years of peace. We had no regulations, but the club formed, it built itself. We did meet with the Ministry of Natural Resources all the time. We built our credibility slowly but surely. And eventually, in 1997, they rewrote the act completely and included falconry regulations. So we'd kind of inched our way up the hill of credibility to get to the point where they went from trying to ban falconry outright to saying, okay, you can have captive bred birds. That was the initial thing, right? And then, but from there, we built out and got extended seasons, and then eventually got wild take in 2012, and just in 2020, we added Goshawks and also simplified the regulations for wild take, so we don't need to get a permit. We can just go take birds. So that was a 40-year journey to go from, we hate you guys, we're going to get rid of you, you're done, you're finished. And I literally remember maybe I was 27. You wonder why I get involved in falconry. I was 27 years old, and I was sitting in the office of the director of the Fish and Wildlife branch, and we had been working with them, time after time, presenting proposals for regulations that would have, regulated falconry properly. We had some support with the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. They came out with us, and they were always there. That's a big organization, 100,000 members. And they listened politely, and they interacted. We went back and forth, and then it got to where we thought we were finally getting somewhere, and we sat in the director's office, and he looked at me, and I was a kid. I'm a kid. I'm 27. It feels like a kid now. And he said, Martin, I know you've done a lot of work here, and you passionately believe all this, but the Ontario government has decided to go in a different direction. You will have 60 to 90 days to get rid of your birds once we adopt this new piece of legislation. And I mean, since I was 9 years old, all I wanted to do was fly birds and just sit there and have the man who can tell, who does this, tell you it's over. You're done. We came out of there, and I mean, I was crushed, but I bet. But we, it was like bone crushing. It's like he couldn't have done anything worse to what I aspired for the rest of my life. So, we put together a plan. I mean, we were up at night writing letters to every single member of parliament from every party there was. We got meetings with as many. We motivated the members. We stopped them. We created enough doubt on the part of other people that they didn't do that. So, that's why I think keeping these, making sure you don't get into trouble is a good idea. That's why, all the things we talked about earlier about making sure you're on the right side of the regulations, because when it's bad, it can be really bad. Right? Sure. So anyway, the bottom line is going from that in 1987, 6-ish, to 2021, having basically a wild take of all the birds we wanted, extended seasons, and probably I would say having maybe one amongst the best relationships with our government that falconry clubs can have. I mean, it's a really strong relationship. That's a big turnaround, and took 40 years to get there of continuous effort. But the result is falconry is safe. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a lot of work. I mean, and it takes a lot of time, and it's amazing how quickly it can be taken away, but it takes forever to build it up and stuff. I mean, that's why,
So anyway, part that obviously on the non-falconry side, on the political side, that whole experience is kind of what, if you want to know who I am, as a, why did I get into NAFA, or how did I get into NAFA, or how do I look at things when I'm facing a problem as NAFA president? Those were my formative years. My formative years were starting there, saying, falconry is over, dude, you're finished, to turning it around. And I mean, I feel like I've described myself as a falconry cold warrior. It's like, even when you're not fighting, you're fighting, right? Because even when they're not shooting at you, they want to shoot at you. Mm-hmm. They're loading their guns. They're aiming. Because for the first 20 years, that's all it was. The government, they couldn't take us out. They lost that battle a few times, but they, even when they weren't shooting at us, they were kind of planning to shoot at us. Mm-hmm. So it took a long time to get that to turn around. It took a long time of just working continuously, even when you thought it was safe, to just keep working to build that trust, build that relationship, turn them around. It took 40 years to go from open animosity between us and the government to, okay, we can probably make this work, maybe, to, a very supportive relationship. And it took a long time. It's like an asset that we built up and I know there are many other places that have gone through a similar process. You need to keep it going, because you don't want to you don't want to let it slip away, that level of trust and interaction, because it's really hard to build.
Yeah, for sure. And as far as your personal falconry during all that time, I mean, have you been primarily more of a long wing guy?
During that whole time, like I said, the first 10 years, we didn't actually have much in the way of regulations. So we were just following regular hunting regulations. But I mostly flew long wings. Started out, I had a kestrel for a little while. I had a Merlin. I had a prairie falcon, which I lost pretty fast. Very good friend of mine got into breeding falcons very early on, and so I was very fortunate that way. And I got some tiercel peregrines in the early days, so kind of in the late 80s, early 90s, up to about 96 or something like that. I flew a tiercel peregrine. And by that time, I had discovered the Huns, and so I was chasing Huns a lot. That tiercel peregrine absolutely he would not touch or look at a duck. That's all I flew him on. Huns, and I never got skunked. I always found some when I went out. So I had some great falconry. I got a female peregrine. Actually, it was a hacked bird from Lynn Oliphant and Patty Thompson out in Saskatchewan. They did a tame hack, and I got a gorgeous female peregrine from them back in '96. I think was the first year I flew that bird, and it was a real high spirited bird. It was probably the best falcon I had. It was it gave me a good run. I had quite a few chases in this first year. I had to try to get the thing to sort of understand how to fly it, because it was just had a much bigger wing on it than anything I'd flown before then. And but it became a really good bird. And I started catching ducks with it too. But it was great on fantastic. I had just a lot of really good Hun flights in the winter. Running through the late fall, and brought it out to Saskatchewan a bunch of times, caught a few grouse with it, sharptails, and she actually hit a tree. She was stooping on some green-winged teal and hit a branch and died in my arms just before a month before I was going to Kansas to try to hawk prairie chickens. Because that was unfortunate. It was my first time trying to hawk prairie chickens. So then I had a succession of other male and female peregrines, on and off. There might have been a small gap in there in the early, 2006 or 7 or something like that. But it was mostly, and peregrines. I like peregrines. I still love peregrines. I like looking at them. I like, my aspiration is to, get another female peregrine like the one I had in the 90s, because female peregrines, they're a good sized bird. And when they want to hit something, they can deliver quite an impact. This hybrid that I'm now flying is actually my first hybrid. So I had resisted getting a Gyr peregrine hybrid for a long time. And I was flying a female peregrine, and I thought, well, I'm going to moving towards retirement. I've got more time to fly. I should get a second bird. I'll get this Gyr peregrine hybrid. And so I flew it last year was the first year. This year was its second year. And of course, it's everything that, hybrids have a reputation for being. Of course, it's a great bird. Last year I had what I'd call a pretty mediocre female peregrine, and this bird, outstripped it pretty quickly. And this second year in its second season, it is, like I said, I think I've had my best season since the 90s with this bird. My license plate is Peregrines, Peregrns. And last year, my buddies, I was out in Saskatchewan, they're constantly teasing me about peregrines versus Gyrs, and they got an old license plate and they fitted an overlay. They made up an overlay out of a piece of paper and some magic some markers and stuff, and changed my license plate to hybrids. That's not that on my license plate. Took a little while for me to notice, but
yeah, it's always slick whenever your buddies put that kind of obscure license plate frame or something around there as a joke, but you don't realize what you've been representing for about months, months on end. But oh, that's awesome. It sounds like you've for the most part have had pretty decent falconry around your area. Unfortunately, it's a common theme. We can't ever talk about it we can't ever talk about it enough, how much we're all losing land and quarry and everything else. But
well, it's got to the point where even the ducks, like my falconry had converted, like the last couple of peregrines, it was all duck hawking. That's pretty much all there was. So it was duck hawking, but even that got to the point where I was coming back, from out west and trying to fly my bird and driving 2 hours to find, a duck setup that I could actually take, because, houses were going up, or factories, or the ponds were drained, or it was just getting harder and harder. And I was driving longer and longer for worse and worse setups, setups that I was driving by some of the places that I used to fly now, when you get used to hawking out west in much bigger country, and, shaking my head. Could not believe that I used to actually fly a bird here. It's pretty tough, and that's just partly population growth and all the rest of it.
For sure. Well, I mean, out of all the different experiences and stuff that you've had throughout the years, I mean, this is always a tough question for people to really kind of recollect, think on, and kind of pick. But I mean, what are your like one or two like most memorable hunting experiences that you've had, or stories, flights, anything like that you can think of?
Well, I can tell you one. I'll tell you one, and it was at a time when we were sort of in the thick of the battling for falconry, and we had a reasonable amount of opposition here in Ontario from the anti-hunting types that really just didn't want us to have birds of prey and didn't want to make it legal to hunt with them, and leave alone take them from the wild. That would have sent them into a tailspin. So we were, and the government was reluctant to move on that. So that was our context, our environment. But there was good huns around, and I went out one day. It was very cold, snow on the ground, clear blue sky, crisp. And it's probably around minus 15 Celsius. So, I guess zero-ish Fahrenheit, kind of a cold winter day. And I spotted some big cold, one area where we have really big cornfields. So way out in this cornfield, I could see a couple of dots, a little covey of partridge up there. So I think, okay, well, this will be good. Typical of the corn rows, I put my plastic cup on the road, so when I went on, I could walk back to the cup and go straight up the corn row to get to where the huns were. And I had my dog with me, and so I put the bird up, and it was like that very light breeze and light air, and I started walking out, and I kind of couldn't see my bird. I kept looking up, and I think I hear a bell, but and the dog meanwhile is running. And so that while I'm doing that, I kind of lose my place. So now I'm out in the middle of this cornfield. I'm way out there, and I can't see my falcon. And now I don't really hear the bell anymore either. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, am I in trouble? But what happened here? Meanwhile, I look over and the dog's on point. And I'm waiting, and I'm thinking, so, I get a little bit closer and closer, and I figure, well, I may as well flush, because I don't know what else to do. And I have to go back to get my old, telemetry out and figure out what happened to my bird. So the partridge get up and go, and I'm watching them fly. They're climbing pretty high, which is usually a sign that they're not very intimidated. So they're off the ground a bit, they're 15, 20 feet. And all of a sudden I hear this slight noise, the wind. Mm-hmm. I look up and I can just see her just teardropping, just still way up there, come down on them. And by the time the huns realized they were in trouble, they were probably 30 feet up, and she came underneath down and just sucked one. It was a stoop and scoop, sucked one up and just carried it way up. And she landed way far away from me. She was probably 250 yards out in the field where she came down with this thing. That's how long it had taken her to get in there. So it was just a gorgeous classic flight on a beautiful day. And I sort of booking my way over there, kind of getting to where, across the rows. And I get close to her, and she's just standing and I wish I had a camera, because she was just standing as pretty as you could be, all folded up nice, with the hun in her feet, looking at me, watching me walk up. And I get there, and she walks off the hun, jumps up on my fist. I pick up the dead partridge, open it up, break it open, where I'm walking out of the field, and there's steam rising off this partridge. And I just had probably at that point the best flight of my life at that point. And the thought that ran through my head is, there's people who don't like this. They want to stop this. There's people I have to deal with. I'm going to go Monday and go deal with people who want this to end. Right?
Yeah.
And for me, it was just a high, just in context. I mean, it was a beautiful flight, but it also had this sort of context around it that made it such a contrast. It was just such a contrast of how, at its best, how beautiful falconry can be. And honestly, I think I wanted to tell all those people that have been giving me such a hard time that if you knew anything about it, you would love it as much as I did.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, all that I really ask for people that are really skeptical or don't understand it is, I'm always kind of, personally, I kind of feel like I'm kind of like, put your money where your mouth is. Like, if you really hate this so much, then you at least have to be willing to experience it yourself. Come see it. And if you still feel the same way about it afterwards, like, okay, at least you've actually taken the steps to at least try to reach some common ground. What I don't understand is all the people that just want to hate on something that they don't understand, but they don't have any inkling to want to try and understand either. It's like,
they don't want to let the facts interfere with their story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's one. I've been fortunate. I've had a few other flights like that. I had a similar flight where, again, funny enough, with this hybrid, I had a flight where I couldn't find the bird just in Nebraska on prairie chickens. Similar to the telemetry, kind of glitched on me, and all of a sudden, I couldn't see anything on the GPS. I couldn't, and my bird had gone off to chase something, and I didn't know where it was. It was the same idea. And eventually, I got the telemetry working, and it said the bird was right above me. And all of a sudden, I looked up, and I could see this tiny little speck that I wouldn't have seen if I didn't know to stare there, of course. And I was 3/4 of the way back to my truck to get the telemetry to figure out what had happened to my falcon, and I had to run up and down all these hills, get to my truck. I was exhausted, gasping, almost ready to throw. I had to go run all the way back to the field and flush. What turned out, I flushed a prairie chicken, and we ended up catching it. So that was kind of nice. But yeah, I hadn't seen my bird most of that flight.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it's funny how that stuff works out. I mean, and sometimes there's just so many days that you have to where it's like you're walking back to the truck, you're giving up, and you're just like, doing the walk of shame. And then sometimes like the great thing happens on the way back to the truck. And,
for sure.
It's funny how that works.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the enduring sort of attractions of falconry is that it's never the same. There's always things happen. I mean, sometimes they're bad things, and sometimes you're trying to climb up on a factory roof or try to figure out how to get up on this factory roof to get my bird back, that has chased a pigeon off into who knows where. And you try to remind yourself that, your initial objective was to have fun.
Yeah.
But, there's also the other things that just, the really cool things that happen.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that sometimes we have to constantly remind ourselves that it's supposed to be fun, and we actually willingly do this, and it's like, there's always those days that we all have that it's a seemingly an exercise in futility, but for some reason we keep going back for more.
There's a certain, I don't know, I guess a certain breed of people because it does take, in my case, it took quite a long time from the time that I got into falconry and I started to catch game on any kind of a regular basis. I mean, anything other than pure accident. That was it. At the time we didn't have regulations. We didn't have an apprenticeship program. We weren't, getting passage birds, and it was hard. It was just, it was like I made a lot of mistakes and things that are obvious now that weren't so obvious when you were just trying to learn it from books and a few phone calls with people. So it took a long time to get to that stage. I mean, I think that, I see young people getting into falconry now that we have access to passage red tails and an apprenticeship program and all the rest of it. And they're able to get that success much, much quicker. And of course that keeps them going, right? I mean, once you get a little bit of success, you're like, hey, this can work. This is great. And it's an impetus for you to keep going. But, for those for those of us who have had to just fail,
Yeah.
it's like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
It's that one time.
Yeah. It's you can always tell the people that are really serious and the people that are really ate up with it, the ones that keep getting kicked in the naughty bits, yet continue to keep on going, over and over again. But before we wrap up, I still want to get like a final piece of advice from you and stuff. But before we wrap up, I mean, just out of curiosity from your standpoint too, and just, kind of specifically talking about, your province and everything. I mean, I can tell that you're pretty happy with the way things have gone and transition and, all the work that's been done over the years to get what you all have. I mean, what do you think still would be cool to be able to see happen from your point of view?
In my own province? Or just in general?
In your own province or in general, whichever. I mean, for Canada or in particular, or, specific to your own province, either one or both.
Well, it would be great. So there are no Canadian provinces that allow non-resident take. That'd be great if there was more of that. We don't have a peregrine take here in Ontario. They do in Saskatchewan. They don't in Alberta, but they're probably pretty close. If they put some effort into it, they could probably get it in Alberta. It's probably further away here in Ontario. I think that'd be a nice to have the kind of thing. The season it's not quite as attractive to get passage peregrines this far north as to say compared to if you live in Texas or Oklahoma, where you're getting a passage bird and you have your whole season in front of you, as opposed to by the time you get this thing out there, there's 3 weeks of season left, right? So that's partly why people aren't falling all over themselves to get passage peregrines, because the utility is not the same. But that would be nice. In other respects, I think that we have our paperwork structure is pretty optimal here in Ontario. We don't have it's less onerous than most other places. I would like to see that sort of spread. I would like to see it so that your falconry license is good no matter. You don't need to get an import or export permit in another province. You can just use it no matter where. That's more common in U.S. states where your falconry license is sort of good everywhere. In the U.S., I think that the next big positive step is peregrine normalization.
Sure.
And we're working hard on that. And that will send a big signal. It's obviously great for U.S. falconers, but it sends a big signal to Canadian regulators as well and Canadian falconers. It gives them a big opportunity because, hey, look what they're doing just south of the border. I mean, it's not, why do we have all these restrictions, right? Because it's the same biology, it's the same bird, it's flying back across the border. So it provides a very strong argument for loosening up peregrine take in Canada too. So those are good things.
Yeah, the domino effect is always nice. It's kind of
If you get involved in making these regulations, every one of those states or provinces, when they make a regulation, they do what's called a jurisdictional scan. What are all the surrounding jurisdictions doing? What do they do on this? Like, I don't care if you want to open a bear season or whatever. They're going to look and say, well, how is bear hunting managed in all of our surrounding jurisdictions, right? That's what they do. And so in the case of falconry, they do that. And Ontario borders 5 states. So it makes a difference, right?
Sure.
They look around, right? And so those are good things. That's what we got to look forward to, I think. In terms of challenges, I think that what we touched on earlier is the challenge that if I could send a message, and we have been sort of going region by region and talking to all the different state club and provincial club presidents and leadership, and just to get to exchange information back and forth. But one of the things that I would say to all falconers is that the challenge in the coming years is going to be to look out for that erosion of the privileges that we've built up because of changes in the regulatory environment, changes to hunting in general and falconry in particular, and some of the positive relationships that we've built up over years are going to, those people are retiring. There's new people coming in. Many of the new people that come into these wildlife regulatory agencies don't have a hunting background right? They used to all be hunters and fishermen. Now they're less and less of them have any experience with hunting or what I'll call traditional wildlife management. And so you end up having arguments that you never had before. And so that's a challenge we're going to face over the next 20 years. They're just going to take a concerted effort on the next generation of falconers to, do what we did a generation ago, right? And pick up that ball. And then there's just the lack of the continuing erosion or decrease or decline in game species and open areas to hunt. That's, of course, a much bigger problem, and we're not alone in that. NAF has been making partnerships with many other conservation-related organizations so that we can all kind of work together and get laws that are favorable. RAWA is one, the Farm Bill. There's all kinds of things that need to happen if we're going to be able to hunt 50 years from now. I won't be hunting 50 years from now, but anybody else is going to hunt 50 years from now, then they're going to need that stuff.
I mean, to be fair, I'm probably not going to be either. So, but, that's, like I said, it's a lot of good information, and I appreciate you, like I said, being willing to share and, just kind of talk about what some of your personal experiences were like and everything today. And, that's some good, I think people need to continue to hear, what some of these challenges are going to continue to be. I've said this before. I don't know if people so much, I don't know if like take things for granted is a good way to put it, but there's a lot of lack of, kind of empathy in a lot of ways, like with the way things are around other parts of the world, because we don't live it, that's why it's been so eye-opening for me to see how things work in these other countries, South Africa and like Mexico and everything. And people need to understand that, it can go away very fast. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And there are, you talk to the Europeans and they lost what we have. Mm-hmm. And they lost what we have, and they feel it acutely. And we have it pretty good. We have our issues, and I think I was talking to one person. I think it might have been a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service official that said, there are a lot of falconers that think we're one lawsuit away from nirvana. That's of course a big exaggeration on a couple of levels, but it also kind of speaks to the fact that a lot of people don't realize really how good we have it. It's not to diminish the issues we have and not to diminish the fact that we need to work hard to make sure we don't lose what we have, but it could be a lot worse. And all you have to do is look at almost anywhere else in the world and you will see it worse. One of the things why I really wanted to do something for Latin American falconry is it's like North American falconry was 60 years ago. And they have amazing raptors, unique quarry. They still have lots of open country, but they don't have the legal environment that we have. And in some of those countries, it's a heavy lift. It's a big stretch to get to where they would need to. There are some countries in South America where hunting is illegal, period. Mm-hmm. Right. So, they got it, but there's other countries where it's a doable thing. And of course, just like, it's like the world, you got to think of it as your neighborhood. Like if falconry is legal and recognized everywhere in the world, well, then the chances of, them trying to wipe out falconry here is, why would that happen? Why would this be the first place on earth that they would wipe out falconry? But if falconry is only legal here and it's illegal everywhere else in the world, well, you can see them coming. Yeah. So why do we want to help Latin American falconry? Well, partly because we can and we should help each other. And partly because if we help them, we're helping ourselves. Right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, that's, like I said, I think that's a pretty good, sentiment to kind of come close to ending on here. And you already gave some good advice and stuff, but is there any last final, thought that you have or any last thing that you want to mention before we call this good or anything or?
I guess I could put in a plug. I'm going to pick up on what you said before. If if you think about all the things that it takes to make your falconry viable, of course, you need to get out in the morning. You need to get up in the morning. You need to train your bird. You need all that stuff. You need to buy the right equipment, all that stuff. But what you don't see is what it took to get you that falconry license, to get you the extended season, to get you, and the only way to get that and keep that is not everybody is going to be active on the legislative front. Not everybody's going to be the editor of the magazine. Not everybody, but you can support all those activities, right? I mean, join your state club, join NAFA. Those are little things. It's like less than a tank of gas. It's not that much. And, get involved if you can. It takes a lot of people to make an organization work at the local level and national and otherwise. But so my closing thought is, don't lose sight of the fact that your falconry rests on the shoulders of a lot of people that went before you. And you need to make sure that those organizations are supported, or you want to have it.
Perfect. Well, I mean, hopefully sometime I can make it up that way. I've actually never been to Canada still.
Really?
Yeah, it'd be really cool to be able to make one of those meets up there sometime.
You should. You'll see some great falconry. They're still out in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and parts of Manitoba, the West, generally. Excellent access to land, and just because of the way the land use is, there's a good game population. Certainly, it's a duck factory of North America. So if you're, there's lots of ducks and then good upland numbers. So you can see a lot of falconry.
Yeah. Well, we'll try and make it happen sometime. But in the meantime, hopefully the next time we see each other, we won't come out with any kind of crud or disease or
that's right.
pestilence.
Yeah. Actually, to be honest with you, I think this is like the second or third. It might actually be the third NAFA meet in a row that I'm coming back with something.
It's hard not to anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, that big of a gathering where you're around so many people at once. I mean, You're gonna get sick. I mean, I try to pop vitamin D and Zicam before I kind of preliminary medication type of deal before I do those things anymore. But sometimes it's still just not enough, unfortunately.
No. Well, it was worth it. I would do it again. Eventually, you would think my immune system would be able to handle it. I think it's the third time I've had COVID.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I tested. So this is the second time I tested. So it's for sure the second time I had it.
Yeah. I for sure had it too. Probably 3. But I mean, after the second time, I was just like, well,
Yeah. Well, the only reason I wasn't even going to test, but then I heard that somebody else from the NAFA meet. I was talking to somebody else who went there and said, "Oh yeah, half my family tested positive for COVID," and I thought, oh. And I happened to have a COVID test left over. I said, well, okay, fine, try it. Sure enough.
Yeah. Well, that's how the cookie crumbles. But
yeah, great.
But it's been great talking to you. I'm glad that we finally got a chance to make this happen.
Yeah, and I apologize for making it take so long. But I still haven't. I know you talked to Mark Williams and Lynn Oliphant. I haven't had a chance to, just been so busy with the meet and just coming down after the meet to just. I got to listen to those podcasts.
Yeah. Well, I've still got like 30 episodes on the shelf that still need to be published, believe it or not.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And I'm trying to, I don't know if you heard the recent announcement or not, man. By the time that this comes out, I'm sure everything will be well underway with it. But, we're basically porting things over, kind of branching out on my own now since things, and all that kind of stuff. And so, things are going to kind of keep going, hopefully in a good direction. And let's go ahead and end it then, and we'll call this good. Like I said, thanks again, and appreciate you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome, Martin.
I appreciate what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate you all and all the work that continues to go on too. So until next time. All right.